Hi, thanks for joining us. I'm Joe Cantu, Director of Digital Marketing at Iron Horse, and I'm joined by Olivier Lebay, the President of Metadata. Olivier is joining us for today's coffee break to discuss three strategies for developing an integrated buyer's journey and a few of the pain points and issues that he's seen throughout his career, and more specifically with some of his clients at Metadata as he works with them to develop these programs. So some of the barriers and challenges that uh, he helps them overcome to reach their ABM goals. And while Olivier does have his coffee, I'm joined by my trusty water bottle because I would be up all night if I had coffee right now. So, Olivier, thanks for joining us, and let's go ahead and get started.
All right, thanks for having me.
So, Olivier, as I mentioned, let's go ahead and dive in. So, as you work with clients, what are some of the bigger pain points and issues you see as they embark upon building a cohesive and integrated buyer's journey?
Yeah, I think it depends. It's a case by case basis, right? Because oftentimes, we'll work with younger companies, right? Series A, Series B companies, and in some cases, they don't yet have their ICP, their ideal customer profile. They don't really understand, the different pains that these individuals might be experiencing. And so I think, the first thing is really understanding, what is your ICP. And then you have to start building content to that. So I'll give you an example. So Metadata is a marketing software technology. We work with B2B vendors. So our buyers and our personas will be VPs of demand generations, as well as CMOs. We also have directors of digital marketing, but then we'll have the campaign managers as well, right? And so in our case, when we do, and what we try to do is like really understand the different personas and the different pains that each of these individuals are running into on a day-to-day basis. And then we essentially create content that helps them better do their job. Right. And so I think that is the first thing you need to really be focused on. And then that leads to, building the right types of audiences when you are trying to do advertising campaigns to those individuals. Irrelevant of the, channels that you're using, you want to be able to make sure that you're, spending money targeting the right people. And sometimes the channels will make it a little harder, right? So, for example, Facebook is a great channel in terms of broad reach, right? There's a lot of people that go there, but they're targeting specifically for, companies like us, or our customers are trying to target B2B companies. It can be really hard to target effectively on Facebook. And so those are some of the things that, we try to alleviate with our customers.
Okay. So let's dive into that a little bit more. So on the, you mentioned the audience building side and, needing to understand ICP and ideal customer profile. So what are some of the tools and tips you'd have there to be able to develop a really strong ICP so that you're at least initially going after the right people?
Yeah, so to figure out your ICP, there's several technologies around that can help you do that. So I used to work at a company called FlipTop. That's exactly what we did at FlipTop. And then other, was like predictive account scoring, predictive lead scoring, which came around like about 7 years ago. So you can basically look at like a Mad Kudu. Will do that for you. You can also look at like a Sixth Sense, can help you figure that out. I think there's some other vendors that can help you do that. And basically what they're doing is they're looking at your close won and close lost historical data. And for that to be effective, you need at least 50, ideally 100, close won opportunities, and plus all of the close lots opportunities. And then it can help you identify, here are the job titles, here are the companies that you want to target, where you have really good conversions. And now once you have that, you could use a tool like ours. Or something like Clearbit to really, understand who you want to target. So in our case, we use our own product. It's called MetaMatch, and that's an audience building tool. And what we've done is we've essentially partnered with 20 different data sources. So we have some firmographic data, technographic data. We have some intent data. We have some mobile device ID data, hashed emails, all of that. We normalize this data through Elasticsearch, and then we have a social data graph of 1.5 billion people. And then we can build audiences. And the cool thing is that we let you preview, which is really a game changer. So if you're really trying to target the right people, you can't really do that with IP address, right? Because you're targeting everybody in a company. So if you use a product like ours, we'll essentially let you preview like the job titles, name of the company, right, the seniority, and so you can preview, and then we push these audiences into channels. And the cool thing is we can, make channels like Facebook work really effectively for B2B because we can do the same type of segmentation that you get on LinkedIn, which is outstanding. You can now do the same on a channel like Quora or Google or Facebook, Instagram.
That's awesome. Very cool. So then I guess kind of diving into your next point. So, looking into the content side and thinking a little bit about, my experiences with metadata, a big, I would say, value that we've seen has been the ability to be able to test that content across your various audiences in a very smart and efficient way. So, and I think a lot of that kind of ties into your third point of making sure that you're reaching the right people, but also making sure that you're reaching them with the right content. So kind of walk me through, your thoughts and best practices on the experimentation and, that side of things with content.
Yeah, so this is something I've fell in love with a few years ago when I was introduced to metadata. So before this, I ran revenue at G2. I spent 4 years at G2, and I helped their CTO come up with the buyer intent product, which I thought was a great way to ensure that you are understanding who is research, who's in market for your type of software. But the issue with that is that it's really hard to hone in and figure out like who are the people that you should be targeting, right? Because once again, intent data tends to be tied to the IP address, and so you don't want to waste your budget targeting 99% of the people that are not a fit for you. And so I was introduced to metadata, and once I learned about not only the audience building tool, but the second thing, which I'll talk about now, which is multivariate experimentation. That got me really excited. Because there's nothing else on the market that does that. And B2B is not, to me, it doesn't seem like B2B is as advanced as B2C, right? B2C has much larger budgets, and experimentation on B2C is much more advanced. So multivariate experimentation, what it means is essentially, if you think of A/B testing, it's like A/B testing to the 10th degree. Right. And what I mean by that is instead of trying 2 different ads, you can try 100 different experiments. And an experiment is isolating text, the copy, the image, the channel, the audience. And so instead of building one campaign at a time, you can create 150 campaigns in minutes where we will isolate all these variables. And then based on the conversions that are happening in the channel, right? Is this person converting to, they're even clicking on the ad, and is the click leading to a lead? Is the lead leading to an MQL? Is the MQL leading to an SQL? Is the SQL leading to an opportunity and pipeline and close won revenue? And so what we've been able to do here at Metadata is essentially create an infrastructure where we can create these experiments, and then we will optimize all of the conversions. We will optimize all of the bidding based on the conversions that are happening across your marketing automation and your CRM to ensure that we are, creating the best campaigns. And when you do experimentation, the majority of your experiments are not going to work out, right? Yeah. But the critical part is getting to statistical significance and honing in on like of 1,000 different campaigns that we have run for you as a customer, like what are the top 5% of campaigns look like, right? And once you understand that, then you can make revisions to those experiments, and then modify the colors or modify the text or layer on some intent data or technographic data to the audience to really hone in to increase your conversion rates. And so what we enable our customers to do is really shorten the amount of time it takes to understand what their buyers are interested in and what helps them convert to create pipeline. And then you can relay all of that information to the sales team, right? You can say these personas and these geographies really like these words. They like these colors, right? They like this content. And that is really important, because if you're trying to do just one campaign at a time, it's going to take you a long time to really figure out like what works and what doesn't work. And so that's what really got me excited about metadata. And this is the reason that I decided to join 2 years ago.
That is a really great point. Just thinking about all the you think about one ad, and like you mentioned color and things like that. And a lot of times I think we often overlook those, but when you actually get the opportunity to test them out, or various CTAs, various images of, it could even be the same content piece that uses slightly altered titles, and you could see wildly different results. So it's always very interesting to be, I would say, reminded of the difficulty, but also the ease of some of the things that we overlook, like testing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I talked to a company this week that somebody recommended. It's called Attentive Insights. And essentially, you can upload your image, your ad, and then it's going to show you a heat map. It's going to show you where humans are going to focus their time on, and it's going to tell you if this ad is likely to be, successful. I'm like, wow, this is pretty cool, because you have like companies like Hotjar who are doing this for your website, right? But this is like doing it for the ads, right? So I have a feeling that advertising is going to get a lot more effective in the future, because you're basically going to have all these resources at your fingertips where you can upload your images, and it's going to tell you like, here's what conversions you should expect if you run this experiment. And I think that's where we're headed, and I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, that is very, very exciting. So I want to jump back to one other point you mentioned, about kind of just sharing insights from a metadata or other parts of an ABM stack with your sales team and with other parts of the organization. I guess I know we've always viewed client communication, goal alignment, all those things as, of course, very important for an ABM program. But I guess, what are some of your tips or kind of general rules for success, maybe on getting alignment and goal alignment on an ABM program?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is to have the sales leader align with the marketing leader. I've been in the space a long time, and it is surprising how often and there's a lot of turnover in both those positions now, right? And so my most recent data I looked at, I saw that CMOs actually don't last as long as CROs, which is kind of surprising, because historically you have salespeople have much more transition, and so if you don't have alignment, and if there's movement there, it's always something that needs to be worked on. But there needs to be alignment at the top, right, between the marketing and the sales leader, because the marketing is going to basically try to create demand. And if the demand that they're generating, the salespeople are not interested in speaking with them, then there's going to be some issues there, right? And that goes back to, what is your ICP? And are everyone aligned on that? And if they are aligned on that, then you have to start creating the content that's relevant to it. And then the leads that are coming in, right, is your MQL scoring. Does it align with what the salespeople want to see in their sales cycle, right? Or the opportunities that are being generated by marketing. And if it's not, which I've seen a ton of time, right? You're essentially, marketing team is spending budget according to their plan, but then the sales team's like, I don't want to talk to these people. So you just wasted a few months and tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars targeting the wrong people because there isn't alignment at the top. So for me, I think that is the most critical part of it, is to ensure that the sales team and the marketing team are aligned in who they want to target, and then what is qualified as an MQL, what is an SQL. Because if your lead to MQL conversion rate is like 50%, that's pretty darn good. But if your MQL to SQL conversion rate is 10%, there's a problem there, right? Yeah. And that is probably because there isn't alignment at the top. And so, given how quickly people are moving on from their roles nowadays, I think it's really important to align as soon as you start your role. Is like, let's make sure that we're talking to the right people, and we have the right things to say to those individuals when they come inbound or when we do generate demand on digital channels.
That makes perfect sense. And I can definitely, understand how there would be kind of those siloed views. And a lot of times, it's not even just about getting alignment at the onset, but making sure that there's kind of continual realignment and revisiting. Because I think to your point, there's always a chance for false positives of, hey, we drove a ton of leads this week, but if ultimately, they're not paying off on the back end, then you have some unhappy salespeople.
You do, and you've wasted a bunch of money, right,
Yeah.
and a bunch of time, and you can't hit your targets. And I think that's something that a lot of businesses are dealing with, and that's all the more important to the first point I made is like if you can preview who you want to advertise to before you advertise to them, then you're going to be able to create better alignment, right? You're going to say like, here are the job titles and the companies that we're going to target for you, salespeople. Do you want to talk to these people? And if not, like, let's make some modifications to the audiences, because that is the first thing that needs to be fine-tuned ahead of the images or the colors that you're using or the words you're using on these ads. You got to make sure that they're the right people.
Yeah, that all makes sense. So to kind of, I guess, wrap things up with a bow, now that we're thinking of the holiday season, just kind of walk us back through your points again of what you see as being kind of those initial points, those initial check boxes that need to be marked off for a successful ABM program, and then any thoughts you kind of want to wrap up with as well.
Yeah. So I mean, the first thing is you need to look at your historical data, close won, close loss conversions, to really figure out like what are the best companies, where should we be spending our time. Because depending on your business, there's probably some industries that are not going to be a good fit, not going to convert as well. And so the first, exercise that I would do is like, look at historical data, and then look at, your largest customers, the stickiest customers, the ones that are upselling most often. What do, what are the pains that we're solving for these individuals? And once you have that information, first thing you do is you go create some content for them, so that you can bring in other individuals that are in a similar situation, and they can find, through searches on Google or Bing or what have you, that they can find a content, right? They come to your website, and then you can cookie them, and then you can retarget them if they fit your ICP. I think that is probably the most important thing that you can do. And then it's what I like, which is the experimentation part, changing colors and things like that, right? So I've come to find out that if you put a female on an ad over a male, your conversion rate is 75% higher, which is interesting, right? I don't know why that is, but anytime our customers are giving us ads, we're like, it might make sense to change, the individual on the page if you want to increase and maximize your conversion rate. So doing experimentation, it does take time, but it definitely is worth it, because you're going to be able to generate more pipeline at a cheaper price. And that is something that I think most marketers are always looking to improve. Yeah. And then, it's looking at attribution, right? And so if you are, leveraging different channels, you need to understand, what is my cost per MQL? What's my cost per opportunity on these channels? And obviously you have different, campaign types that you can be running as well, right? You have demo requests, you have top of funnel content, middle funnel content. So you need to have a full funnel content strategy. You can't just be asking people for demo to a cold audience, because you're going to be paying way too much money for that. And so you need top of funnel, bottom funnel content, mid funnel, depending on, and then based on what's happening in Salesforce, the stages they're at, then you should be leveraging, a sales acceleration campaign, where you are targeting the buying committee when things are late stages and things like that. I think that historically people have relied on traffic. They're relied on clicks and impressions. And we've come to find out that doesn't mean that you're going to be able to hit your targets and hit your demand generation goals. You need to be focused on, the quality of the leads that you're generating, first and foremost.
Yeah, that all makes sense. Well, Olivier, thank you again for joining me. And I also want to thank you for, as we we're hosting this event. We mentioned that Iron Horse is going to make a $5 donation to Toys for Tots, and you actually stepped up and chose to match it on MetaDude's behalf. So just want to thank you for that, in addition to joining us.
Of course. Always a pleasure being here. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks.
All right. Bye.